Hey guys, what's going on? So in today's video, I want to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the world right now, and that is with this Covid-19 or coronavirus that's going around everywhere. Now it's causing a huge issue amongst people. It's causing a lot of panic, a lot of fear. But I really wanted to go ahead and look at the data, and I wanted to better understand, what kind of a pandemic is this really? And does it warrant people going and buying cases and cases of water or toilet paper or hand sanitizer and a whole bunch of other necessities that they feel that they need? I almost feel like a lot of these people that are doing this watched that movie Contagion not too long ago. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty spot on. Check it out. But what I really wanted to do was take a data-driven approach to this, and I wanted to run an entire little project that I did in Jupyter Notebook, and I wanted to walk you guys through how I make sense of this information and they answer the question, do we really need to panic or not? Now, I should preface this by saying I'm not a medical doctor by any means, so a lot of this is just my own opinion based on the analysis that I've done myself. And I think taking a data-driven approach generally is probably the safest approach. So let me first talk about the data. I actually went to this website called worldometer.com. or worldometer.info, sorry. Now what this website does is it actually breaks down the coronavirus updates in terms of the total number of cases, any new cases, new deaths, total deaths, and all that other kind of stuff, down to the country level. So essentially it gives you an update every single time they update the website. I'm not sure who's running the background of the website, but thank you very much. This is very good information for educational purposes like I'm going to walk through today. But it gives you, it consistently updates this website in the back, so you should go ahead and definitely check it out. I've also given credit to the website down in the description, so be sure to check that out as well. But it's a great site. Now, when I look at this information, there's a lot of good details here. But when you're going to think about using something like pandas to go ahead and mine this, I can already see a couple of red flags, and that is, having these plus signs, these commas, these blanks, and all that stuff. So just to give you some insight, I am scraping this live right now, and I'm just going to show you an example. So China, 8883 total number of cases, plus 23, 3226, 8083, 23, 3226. So the information is actually coming right off of this. So whenever this gets updated, this table here gets updated as well. And it's important for me because I love running these kind of analyses in the background, and I like having the most relevant and current up-to-date data. So what we're going to try to do today is attempt to answer, statistically speaking, whether or not we need to panic or not. And by the end of this analysis, I hope to answer that question for you. Now, I'm not going to do a code walkthrough today, but I'm going to tell you the technique that I'm using and what I'm doing in this to help you understand how to think about this a little bit differently. So first and foremost, I need to clean this up, and I need to make sure that I have a data frame that has all of these pluses and commas gone and anything that's blank filled with zeros. So as you can see, I've done that here. I basically took out the country column and I've made everything else numeric, and then filled anything that is an NA with a zero and took away some of these pluses and commas and all that stuff. So now I have a data frame that is numeric and I can actually do something with it. Now it's not actually 5 lines. I've just did the df.head. When I go ahead and run this, what you'll notice, it's 163 rows. That means there's 163 countries today that are impacted. Now, in order to really make some sense of this for me, now whoever published this, like I said, did a great job of giving some good high-level information up here. But for me to really understand this and to digest this, I need to add in a couple more columns. I want to understand what is the mortality rate that is out there today by country. And that's just taking the total deaths divided by the total number of cases and then multiplying it by 100 to make it a percentage. I did the same thing for the recovery rate, and that is how many people have actually recovered in that specific country and how many active cases are there. And this is actually very, very important, and you'll sort of see later on why. Now, this metric I would almost highlight as a gold standard metric for me when I did my analysis, and that is the mortality rate per 1 million people. The reason why that's important is when you start looking at things like total number of deaths, it's never relative, and that's because the total number of cases and the country size for that matter could be massive, like China versus Spain, or China versus Italy. I believe Italy has a 65-70 million population. China's over 1 billion, so it's not even comparable. But when you break it down to mortality per 1 million, that basically tells you how many people in a population of 1 million are likely to recover or likely to die from the coronavirus. And I have the same thing from a recovery standpoint. I have a recovery to mortality ratio, and then my recovery odds. And I'm going to walk through this in a second. But what I did right now is I wanted to give you some context in terms of how the World Health Organization calculates this. The numbers you'll see are very similar to what they're reporting. So the total world mortality rate right now is 3.92%. The overall recovery rate is about 43.42%, and the active rate is 52.65%. The recovery to mortality ratio is about 11.1. That means that for every one mortality, roughly 11 people will recover. In other words, for a given case, a patient's odds of survival across the world today is around 91.71%. And today that's largely actually driven by China. They've really turned things around. But let me walk you through what all of this means right now. So this will add up to 100. Basically what this says is about just a little over half the cases today are unsolved. So we don't know whether they've recovered or whether there was a mortality or not. There's just people that are infected out there. And that's important to know because when you look at some countries that are starting to develop these things or starting to get a rise in the number of cases, you'll see that you don't really need to panic right now because the case is still active, meaning that they haven't died or they haven't recovered yet. And statistically speaking, for that country, sometimes the favor is in their odds, but we'll take a look at that in a second. So this is actually the number of people that have unfortunately passed away as a percentage of the total number of infected cases. Now, having said that, 43.42% actually recovered, which is remarkably larger than what we've lost in terms of individuals. Now, the recovery to mortality ratio is basically taking my recovery rate and divided by my mortality rate, or in other words, it's the same thing as me saying taking my total recovered divided by my total death. And that just gives me a ratio of how many people are more likely to survive than they are to die. Then you come up with something called the recovery odds. And the recovery odds is basically taking the 68,000 that have recovered in China, adding the 3226 that have passed on, and then taking this number, dividing by that total, which basically gives you the distribution of recovered over all cases that have already been solved. So these are non-active cases. So in other words, let me explain it this way. We already know what happened with these individuals. There's some that passed on, some that recovered. Now the ones that are active out there, so the 52.65% of people that are active out there have one of two routes. And that is there's a 91.71% chance that they're going to make it. And there's a 9% chance that they're not going to make it based on this split in distribution. So across the world, the odds are actually in our favor. But now let me walk you through something else. And let's walk through the top countries that have some of the issues out there. And again, I've constrained this to 5. I can make this whatever number, but this will basically give me everybody. Again, 163 rows. And I sorted this by mortality per 1 million cases. And the reason why that's important is when they're actually highlighting where some of these issues are, you're gonna notice very quickly that some of these issues are actually sitting in countries like Iran, Spain, France, some in China, some in Switzerland. So let's walk through what this means. So in Iran, for approximately every 1 million population, 10 people have passed on, 54 people have recovered. Or if you want to look at it in percentages, 5.6% have passed on, 30.61% have recovered, and about 64 of them are unsolved because they're active cases right now. When you look at Spain, which is the next highest, for every 1 million population, approximately 7 people have passed on. And then when you look at, I believe this was France, about 2.26, China 2.24, and then finally Switzerland around 2.19 people. And it's important for me to understand it this way because this helps me understand where some of the biggest threats are today. Now, having said that, I'm looking at this in very much in whole numbers. There's various other ways to look at it. So what I'm going to do here is I want to be able to group the rest of the world in what I would like to call other. So although I've got China, Iran, Spain, Switzerland, France, I want to say if you're not part of those countries, then I'm going to put you as a part of others so that the other 163 or ish or whatever it is, the difference between the total subset and the 5 are also represented in here as well. And in order for me to do that, all I did is I dropped the country column out of the data frame, and then I went ahead and converted everything, all this back to numeric, took the difference between the total of these 5 minus the entire original data frame, and then that's how I came down with other and then added country back in. So that's all this script is basically doing. So now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and plot to see how these top 5 countries compare with other across the globe basically. So what this tells me is that today China represents about 44.3% of the total cases that are out there. Italy has a pretty big share of 15.3. Then I have other, which is 23%. Iran is pretty big, up to 8.2. So This kind of gives me a distribution to help me understand what the current landscape looks like in terms of understanding the total number of cases. But if you remember above, I actually said us understanding the active number of cases is equally important. And for that, what this helps me understand is this. Even though that China has 44% of the total cases, what they're working with right now is about less than 10% of the total cases. So what that tells me is they've actually resolved a lot of their cases. And that's true because when you look at the original data set over here, China had about 80,000 cases, which is why that pie is so big with the 44%. But because they had so many recoveries, their active cases are down to just under 9,000, which represents less than that 10% of pie that we saw. So that's actually a really good thing because you started off at a really high, but you've come down. When you look at countries like France, their total cases is around 3.6. When you look at their active cases, 6.8. Doesn't exactly have the same picture. Italy, for the most part, when you look at their numbers, 15.3 total cases. That also means that they still have a lot of majority of the active cases open too right now. So there's something to be said about that. So let's just quickly go back up and look at Italy just to understand that from a table standpoint. Now, if I look at Italy again, total cases 27,000, active cases 23,000. So we've really only resolved about whatever these two add up to is around 5,000, 4,000 cases or so. So although that's not a huge data set, there is something to be learned from that at the same time. But that's why I said understanding the active cases is very important, because if this number is very close to the total number of cases, statistically that number may or may not be relevant. So let's keep going down our analysis. Now, the other thing I wanted to understand was the recovery versus the mortality rate. And when you run an analysis like this, what this basically tells you is this says when you look at China's recovery rate, it's almost sitting at, like we saw above, around 95%. And their mortality rate is relatively low at around 5 or 6% according to this. The whole point of this chart is this. As long as your light blue line is on the right hand side of the dark blue line, the country is doing better than it is doing worse. Now, even though the light blue line or bar may be onto the right side of the dark blue bar, if it's too close, like in Italy's case, that just means that they're kind of neck and neck in terms of recovery and mortality. So that's not good. And in France's instance right now, this doesn't look good, but at the same time, we saw France's active cases were fairly close to, I believe, their total cases, if I could pull it up here. But if you look at their active cases, around 64.73, total cases 66.33. So all of this provides some insight. It's still not statistically big enough, in my opinion, to warrant anything right now. Though the model's just running the algorithm right now, so it's going to pull things. We can always go back and, if we wanted to, go ahead and filter out things based on, make sure you have at least X number of cases, or you have at least a particular active to total case ratio. So you can always do that kind of fun stuff afterwards as well. But this is just to give you an example of what that looks like. And I also want to take this opportunity to talk about Levers.ai. What Levers.ai is, it provides a skills gap for people within organizations or people that may be displaced in capabilities that are upcoming in the future, like AI, machine learning, and software development. Approximately 800 million jobs that are going to be displaced, in which case there's going to be a lot of upskilling that's going to be required. And if you want to get ahead of the curve and learn a little bit more about some upskilling possibilities, check out Levers.ai. Now, the next thing I did is I wanted to understand the best recovery rates that are out there today. So today, China's leading the pack with 95%. Iran is sitting at around just over 80%. The rest of the world is sitting somewhere around, hovering around the 70% or so. Spain followed by 60, and again, these ones may or may not be statistically relevant at this point. But remember, when we pulled this data, this wasn't pulled on recovery odds. This was pulled on the mortality rate per 1 million to show the most severe instances that we have. So you can actually have other countries here that have much, much better recovery rates, and we're going to see that a little bit below. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to analyze the top 25 countries, in my opinion, that have, when I'm looking at mortality per 1 million population. So if I run this chart, this again shows me the same thing. So if I look at my mortality per 1 million, Italy's now sitting at around 36 people or so, I believe that's what it said. So for every 1 million population, 36 people are passing away because of coronavirus. Iran is sitting at around 10 or so. So it's sorted based on what I would like to just call severity so far. And now when you go back and look at this, If I look at those top 25 countries by severity, the reason why this graph is really important is this is amongst the top 25 most severe countries that are by mortality per 1 million population. Though having said that, some of these guys are actually seeing success. So when we look at countries like China, for example, total cases 80,000. I'll have to fix that. Should say active, not whatever that is. Cases 9,000. Recovery odds 95%. So China's looking pretty good. Now, if you look at countries like Japan or Hong Kong, they're coming out with some stronger results. If you look here, Iran has still about, they've solved about 6,000 cases or so. Of that 6,000, we can infer that about 85% of them recovered, which is still significant number in my opinion. Sorry for this. Let me just go ahead and zoom into this properly. And so if I wanted to look at other countries, I can easily do that. Go over here. I believe this is the USA, and USA has 4,700 active cases. 4,700 total cases, 4,500 active cases. And again, the odds are just based on 200 cases or so not a big 200 resolved cases, that is. And what this tells me is that more people have passed on than they have recovered in the States. When you look at Canada, we have about 441 cases, active cases 426, so not a whole lot of history there either. But this is interesting. Now, everybody's saying that right now the epicenter of this outbreak is really in Europe, and that is actually true. Though you have to ask yourself how you're quantifying this again, right? So if I look at Italy, Italy's got 27, almost 28,000 cases, so solved about 5,000 or so. Of that, you can say more than half of them survived. Is that a scary number? Yeah, it could be considered a bit of a scary number because, you still lost about 2,500 people or so. When you look at Spain, the active cases relative to the total cases is not that far off, but out of the 900, you can infer that about 60% of them survived. Now, when you look at some of these other countries, like I said, like France, these are very small numbers. So even though we're saying the epicenter is in Europe, which I don't disagree with right now, these numbers are bound to grow in terms of active cases and in terms of total cases. We just need a little bit more time to understand the severity of it. And that's no different than when China first had their outbreak. We had to understand what was happening in that country. You're going to see a graph below that actually depicts where China was, back in January or February of this year and where they are today. And the results are actually interesting. Now, as these guys grow in the number of total cases, but more importantly, as we understand more and more about solved cases and the active to total case ratio drops, we're going to have a better understanding of the actual mortality to survival ratio as well. So this is a good way to go ahead and plot these. Now remember, the criteria that I used again was looking at the top 25, in my opinion, that were at risk. If you were to go ahead and plot every single country, which I'm sure we can do as well, it's just going to take a while to render, you'll probably see a lot more greens and maybe some more oranges and hopefully not as many reds. But this is a good pictorial view to sort of understand exactly what's happening. We'll get a better understanding of, I'm sorry guys for this moving everywhere, my mouse is moving it, but we'll get a better understanding of this in due course to see what actually is happening with them. And so when you want to look at the recovery odds and you want to say, well, who's got some good recovery odds based on this information? China sitting at around 95%, Hong Kong sitting around 95%, Egypt sitting at about 88%, Iran sitting at about 85%, and Australia sitting at around 84%. And again, we can always go ahead and filter these out for, make sure you have a minimum of 500 cases for you to qualify to get into this. That can always be done as well. This is just showing you how you can use pandas to do an amazing analysis, in my opinion. All right, let's keep going down. Now, what I built here is I built a little search thing. So what that allows you to do is I can go ahead and pop in a country if I wanted. So let's just type in China. And what that's going to do is it's going to help me understand China's recovery ratio relative to that of the world. Now, if this ratio falls between 75% or higher, that is pretty much what I use to govern these. So I didn't explain this, so let me go back. The way these colors got depicted is if the recovery odds were greater than 75%, I said make it green. If it's between 50 and 75%, I said make it yellow or orange in this case, and anything below 50%, we're going to make it red. And this is sort of governed by the same rule, and that is if you're greater than 75, give it a green. If you're between 50 and 75, then make it yellow or otherwise red. So China is going to show up as a green because we know that. But if I go ahead and rerun this, and I put in something like Canada. I know Canada's popping up as yellow because our recovery ratio is likely just slightly less than 75 in this case. It's probably closer to like 74, 73, but we can always look that up later. And then if I go ahead and pull up a country that I know is red, something like France, it'll show me this. So this is more for me to just go in daily if I wanted to go do a quick sanity check against, Canada, because that's where I live. Or if I wanted to look at, our friends in the States or, maybe some other part of the world, India, China, and all those other places, I have the ability to quickly take a look to see, what the status of that country is. So that's just more for me. So I want to tie this all together. I think one of the most important things is, well, what does this mean? What do we learn from the coronavirus? What do we learn with what's been happening? What I did is I went and I now pulled and I scraped all the different recoveries that we've had versus all the different deaths that we had across the world. I couldn't get this by country, unfortunately. If I did, it would have been way better, but at least I got it, around the world. What this tells you is, how many people died, how many people recovered across the world on a particular date. So this happens to start on February 2nd and work its way down all the way up to, March 16, which is today. And that helps me generate a graph like this. And let me help you understand why this graph is extremely, extremely important. We know that the coronavirus actually started sometime around December 31st, and it trickled its way up until February 2nd, where we actually started seeing some recoveries, or at least reporting some of the recoveries. Prior to that, it was mostly active cases. China was trying to figure out for a month, it looks like, to see, what this thing is, how it's happening, how the numbers are growing, and all that other stuff. And don't forget, they built that easy hospital in, 9 days or something, which was unprecedented as well. But regardless, all of that contributed to some level of recovery that was happening. Now, although this is talking about the world recovery rate, around February 2nd, the majority of infected people were in China. So it's fair to assume that the recovery rate on February 2nd was that of China, which was sitting at around, call it around 55, 58, 56% or so. Over time, what's happened is more and more countries have started reporting active cases. More and more countries have been reporting deaths, but at the same time recording recoveries as well. But what we see is, despite the fact that the number of cases actually growing, we're seeing the actual world recovery rate starting to increase significantly. Now, I know a lot of this, some people may say, is part of China, just because of all the protocols they put in. They put in a whole bunch of machine learning and artificial intelligence to do cleansing, to do temperature checks and all that other stuff. Some of it, some people may argue, is a little bit invasive, but at the same time, there's a lot of, ingenuity that went into it as well. But you guys should definitely take a look at that. But if you look at China, it was sitting around 55% or so, and now we just saw they're sitting at around 95%. In the span of a month and a couple of days, that's actually pretty encouraging for the number of cases that they've actually had. And what you'll see is that sometime around March 7th or so, we actually saw a little bit of a peak here, which was just under 95%. And you're seeing that this is starting to dwindle down a little bit, which is actually expected, because as the number of cases grow across the country, we're going to have more active cases. We're not going to have cases that are exactly resolved right now. Some countries are actually in the learning phase, and that is where China was way back in the beginning. If, countries are not prepared for this and it's hitting them pretty quick, they're effectively going to see a few mortalities in the short term because they're not sure how to prepare for it. You may also have particular countries that have older generations or older populations, or populations with a high rate of obesity or heart disease or diabetes or something along those lines, which can be tapering into this as well, or trickling into this number. But my suspicion is this number, as those countries begin to learn, is going to dip down probably a little bit more and then start making its way up. And we're going to see a little bit of that cyclical event, in my opinion. As this also makes its way to North America, the States and Canada are starting to see quite a bit of this activity starting to happen as well. But what people are panicking about is that right now people are panicking about the total number of cases, not understanding that we need more data, because right now, if you think statistically and historically speaking, the numbers are actually on our side from a recovery standpoint. You saw Iran right after China that was seeing this huge outbreak, but at the same time, they have about an 85 or 86% recovery ratio, with, I would say, enough data to help us understand that. But what this also allows countries that are getting affected later on to do is to actually learn from what some of the other countries have actually done to remedy this. So your dip that you may see may not be as steep. It may actually come down a little bit here and then maybe work its way back up. But the fact of the matter is that the numbers are on our side, and we have a lot of people that are panicking and, doing some things out there. And so I can appreciate that for certain age categories. As a matter of fact, I did a small little analysis. And in this analysis, what I did is I actually looked at specific countries. I looked at their median age, I looked at their life expectancy, and I looked at the remaining age. So let me walk you through what this is. I pulled this off of Wikipedia, basically. So the median age and then the life expectancy. The remaining age is the difference between the two. And the reason why I found remaining age to be somewhat intriguing to look at is because if I look at any given time right now, a particular person has 41 years in Afghanistan left, according to this statistic, to live. If I look at Albania, they have about 27 years. If you look at Algeria, they have 32 years. So what does that mean? What that means is it tells me one of two things. One, it tells me the median age today. So if you have a very young population, that's going to drive this number much higher. If your life expectancy is a lot higher, that's going to drive this number higher. What this means is median age of younger people, much more healthy people. Life expectancy of higher, I would maybe somewhat actually attribute to some kind of environmental factors. So maybe people are living, longer because of specific foods they're eating there, or specific, environmental conditions, low pollution, generally good exercise, a happy environment can all contribute to life expectancy. And so the goal was to see is if this number was higher, was there an actual correlation or not to your odds of surviving this thing? So I ran the little correlation coefficient here where I added all this stuff. And what it tells me is that I have about a 17% correlation between recovery odds and my remaining age. So what that means is that there's about a 17% relationship. The easiest way, if you look at this from a linear perspective, 17% of this is explained by remaining age. So although I would consider that as somewhat of a low correlation, anything below 0.3 generally I'd say is a low correlation. 0.3 to 0.6-ish I would say is probably a medium correlation. Anything above that is a high correlation. It still does explain a little bit of it, or at least, it does here, or at least the numbers show it. Now I can take this analysis so many steps further. I would love to look at things like, can I actually get medical information per country? If I looked at the number of people that were healthy versus some people that actually had some kind of underlying issues, a ratio of something like that. Could I get pollution rates for specific countries that are, in this, to see whether or not there's a correlation, given this is a respiratory issue? And moreover, I would actually go in and filter some of this data as well, so that I have a good sample size to go and look at this against. But the message I want to leave you guys really with is look at this curve. I mean, this curve has really taught us a lot. And we are going to see this curve, in my opinion, we're going to see this for different countries. They're just going to happen at different points in time. So is there going to be some mortality? Unfortunately, yes. And even if you look at the stats for most of the people that have passed on right now, a good chunk of them were actually a lot older or did confirm to have some kind of underlying issue. So for that population, I would definitely watch out. Watch out for your elderly, watch out for, people that aren't 100%, watch out for people that have these underlying issues. This is a time to go and help one another out. But the fact of the matter is the numbers are on our side. This whole concept, or this whole thing about people going and buying toilet paper and hand sanitizer and just clearing the markets out, one of the things you have to understand is that there really is no shortage. There are plenty of articles online that actually show people that are buying this stuff, driving to dollar stores, driving to your Walmarts, driving to your pharmacy stores, buying up on this inventory and then trying to resell it, 8 to 10 times the MSRP. Which I have an opinion of, but I'm not going to state it here, and it's not a good opinion. But regardless of the fact, people are doing that. And as a result, that creates a huge drop in supply, and that creates this, this panic to people to say that I'm not going to be able to get this item. And, Amazon and a few other organizations have done the right thing, and they've banned some of these listings where people are selling it for these outrageous numbers or outrageous prices. So they've actually done the right thing, in my opinion, from that perspective. And I'm hoping that the supply is going to start stabilizing over the next couple of months. But when the medical experts and the experts around the world are saying, don't buy up, don't panic, there's something to be said about that. They're not just making stuff up. They've obviously, witnessed this through SARS or MERS or, all those other things, Ebola and all those other things that happen in the past. These guys obviously have experience that we don't. So let's, rely on some of our medical practitioners and also give them credit for the work that they've done in the past as well. So that is it, guys. What today's video was really about was to help you guys understand how to use pandas to do somewhat of a thorough analysis. And like I said, there's probably a lot more work that we can do to make this a lot better. better. But this is something that I'm going to run on a daily basis just to monitor, to infer different things and have an opinion out there before I, just start listening to the media, which may or may not be the right thing to do. So if you guys enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. Stay safe, and I will see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.